what's up, everyone? Sam Shaw here, founder of Wall Street Mastermind. Really excited to be back today with another client interview for you guys. Today we got Patrick on with us, and I'm really excited to be talking to Patrick because he just finished going through the summer 2024 recruiting process and was able to land an offer in a relatively short amount of time, I would say. Because really, we only started working with Patrick, I guess, 2 months ago, and so everything happened very quickly. And so just wanted to get him come on here and talk about kind of his journey and how he was able to do what he did, and hopefully just share some insight for you guys along the way in terms of things that you could potentially apply to your own process as well. So Patrick, first of all, obviously, thank you for taking the time to be here with us today. And if you don't mind starting out just by introducing yourself briefly, giving people a sense of kind of like who you are and like kind of what your profile is, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, great. Like Sam already stated, my name is Patrick. I am currently a sophomore at Colby College, which is up in Waterville, Maine. And sort of going back to like my high school experience, I went to high school I'm from the Chicagoland area, so I went to high school in Illinois for 2 years, and then I ended up making the transition to go play sports up in at the Hotchkiss School in Connecticut, and then I started to find my way to Colby College, where I am currently double majoring in both political science and economics. So yeah, I guess my interest in investment banking and like wanting to do the recruiting for the investment banking cycle sort of stemmed from one of the prior internships that I sort of had, where I was like I was interning for the lacrosse club that I worked at, and we were looking at different sort of markets to expand the club program into. And I did a lot of research on the Pacific Northwest, which is kind of ironic because that's where I'm going to be ending up next summer. I'm really looking forward to that. But that was like my initial sort of interest in like a super informal way into like M&A work, or like looking to sort of expand businesses. And that's why I sort of wanted to get into investment banking. And I really went into it very blindly. And like Sam said, we only started working together about 2 months ago. And that's after like probably like a month or two after like the actual investment banking timeline sort of started. And one thing that I noticed was I was just like my resume and my application were just not up to par. Just being able to submit these applications blindly was not great, and I was not getting any interviews at all. I
Mm-hmm.
just remember I was playing it as a numbers game. Like you're supposed to do networking is just trying to send as many emails out as possible and talk to as many people as possible. But networking is very different than the application process, where when you're networking, obviously you're just trying to reach out to as many people just to get in front of as many different bankers as possible, versus with your application, you obviously want to show the best side of yourself.
Yeah.
And I was not doing that. I was just doing the same thing as my networking, and just trying to apply to as many places as possible. Like I was just going through lists and lists of banks, and I think I sent out like, which I regret now. Prior to starting the program, I wish I could go back in time and maybe do this differently, like 2 months prior to what I did. But I just sent out a bunch of blind applications to about like 75 banks, especially the ones that came out earlier, like in January, February, and I just had no luck from those. I was just getting constant rejection letter after rejection letter, and that's where I sort of noticed that what I was doing wasn't working, and I needed some help to sort of get those first interviews, especially because I did actually get one interview for equity research at a Midwest bank. And I remember I was asked to sort of walk through the three financial statements just as like a first interview question. And I just like completely blanked. I didn't even know what to do. And I think that was like a big kick in the back and a big like eye opener too. Like coming from Colby, I knew that I was at a disadvantage just because we don't have a business school. It's a liberal arts school. Like we have a like quote unquote concentration in financial markets, but they only offer three classes, which is financial accounting and then corporate finance 1 and 2, which just wasn't enough. Especially with how early the sort of investment banking process starts, we can't like take those classes until after then. It's usually like a junior year class, junior year, senior year level class. So you're going to take those. But yeah, just because of those reasons, I sort of looked into Wall Street Mastermind. I know I'd always seen like those ads come up on my when I'm just like kind of scrolling through social media, and then I took the risk. I did an intro interview with Joseph, and then ultimately found that like I just needed some help, and
Yeah.
that's exactly why I came across Wall Street Mastermind.
Gotcha. Thanks for that intro. I mean, that was very thorough, and obviously there's a bunch of follow-up questions I have coming out of that. But before we dive into all of that, I guess um people always want to know right off the bat, like, so what was the outcome, I guess? Like, where are you going to be going next summer, and what are you going to be doing?
Yeah, so I totally forgot to touch up upon this, but I really only had one offer that I ended up taking just because of the other places I was interviewing at the time that I accepted my offer weren't able to accelerate. So I was really I was interviewing at Goldman for asset management, Citi for sales and trading, and then I ended up actually getting my final offer from Cascadia Capital, which is out. They're pretty much located mostly in the West Coast, but they're sort of branching out, and they're really like aiming at focusing on the maybe less popular markets for investment banking. So they're in Seattle, Austin, LA, et cetera. And yeah, I ended up taking that offer. And I will be entering in Seattle at Cascadia's headquarters next summer.
That's awesome, man. So obviously, big congrats on that. And yeah, like the recruiting timeline thing is always tricky to navigate because all these firms kind of roll out offers at different times, and usually like they don't all line up nicely where you get to like make a decision after you hear back from all of them. So that's a super common thing. But so you were kind of talking about this a little bit, but obviously you started recruiting for investment banking prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind, right? And so what what were some of the things? I mean, aside from you primarily talked about like how you were kind of just spraying applications, and we call it like the spray and pray, right? But
Exactly.
in terms of like the actual preparation itself, like how were you going about the preparation process, whether it's like preparing for interviews or even like learning how to like apply and network and get interviews? Like what resources were you kind of already using on your own prior to joining Wall Street Mastermind?
Um, yeah, that's a great question. And prior to Wall Street Mastermind, I think, and I think it's what everyone uses is like the guides that everyone sends around. I know that one of I have an upperclassman that I used to play lacrosse at the Colby College men's lacrosse team, and he like tried to help us out a little bit and was sending us he sent like a few of the guys in my grade that were interested in finance an email about maybe ways to go because he's getting into growth equity right out of school, and he sent us a bunch of different tools to use to sort of help us out, whether it be like 400 question guide, the red book, etc. So like honestly, like I tried to memorize those, but it just wasn't really working because I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. And I also took financial accounting in my sophomore fall this past year. And that didn't help at all for me. Just because accounting is like the actual class is very different than the accounting material that I or that I actually needed to know for the class. And
Yeah.
I also like had no finance background. I remember walking into the class on the first day, and like my teacher jumped right into like balance sheets, and I didn't even know what that was. So I was just falling behind right away, and I was just playing catch up the whole semester. So that didn't go too well for me. So yeah, just doing that. And then networking wise, I was just like sending out emails, just asking people to talk and just hoping that they would respond. And luckily, like small school environments like Colby tend to have, I think, a better track record of having people respond to you. So I was like fortunate enough with that. But my emails weren't crafted in a way to where I was really creating relationships with these individuals. It was like I spoke to them once, like asked them a few questions, and then that was it. We just kind of went on with our way after that.
Got it. Okay. So basically, like it almost sounds like on the networking side, you knew that's something you're supposed to do, but you just didn't really know like how to actually do it effectively. So you were almost just like going through the motions and
Exactly.
checking the box, but not being effective. Um, and then on the interview side, you kind of just did what everyone else is doing, right? Which is read the most popular guides out there. It's funny, like because I've thought about this a lot. Obviously, like a lot of students fall into this trap of just getting the guides and then just spending a lot of time memorizing it. Like I don't know how much time you spent reading these guides or memorizing these questions, but usually it's pretty time consuming because like I mean, think about how much time it would take to memorize answers to 400 questions. Like that's quite a bit of time, right? But the problem is like obviously you're not going to get asked the exact same questions that you memorize, and so if all you're doing is memorizing those answers, like you're probably going to get tripped up in the interview, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is I think there's I think there's a bit of like survivorship bias, right? Because um of course, like, all the upperclassmen or most of the upperclassmen that you look up to who have already succeeded in this process, like they use these guides, and then so it's very easy to think like, oh, well, then all I gotta do is do the exact same things that they did. But at the same time, like I say survivorship bias because for every person that did that successfully, there's probably like I can show you 20 other people who did that unsuccessfully. It's just that you'll never hear from them because they're too ashamed to talk about it, and like you're not going to them for advice. Right? So like and so like I think that's like a common thing that we see a lot of people kind of like fall into that trap. And then like your point on the accounting class too, I think is very interesting as well. I think a lot of people think like, hey, if I've done well in accounting in school, like I should do well on the accounting questions in the interviews. And then like one thing that they don't tell you is that the accounting classes in school are designed to teach you how to be an accountant,
Yeah.
not like teach you how to be an investment banker. And so like accountants like to talk in like debit this and credit that, and like this is how you balance like a T ledger, right? And that's like one of the things you usually learn when you take financial accounting. And then like in banking, they don't talk like that. And if you talk like that in an interview, which some students will make that mistake where they start like speaking like the accountant lingo, and it'll automatically get you dinged because it's like, oh, okay, so this person is not an investment banker, he's more of an accountant, right? And so like you have to learn accounting, but you have to learn it in like you have to learn how to speak the language in like the investment banker way as opposed to like how accountants do it, right? And so that's honestly like for those in our audience who haven't taken accounting yet, like, I just want you guys to have that heads up. It's like, don't just rely on what you're learning in your accounting class in school, because if you do that, you're gonna get dinged on your interviews. So, I guess the other thing is like you talked a little bit earlier about like, why you decide to join Wall Street Mastermind, right? But I want to kind of come back to that a little bit. So, obviously, as you said, like you submitted was 75 applications prior to joining. So that's a lot of applications actually. So you were very on top of it. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it sounds like you only got was it one interview, was the equity research interview out of those 75 apps, right?
Yeah, I ended up only getting one interview from just like what you said, spraying and praying everywhere.
Yeah. And so obviously like at that point you're like, okay, this is something's wrong. This is not working. Um, which yeah, it's unfortunate, like, because I mean 75 is a lot, right? And so like I think like once you realize it though, there's still plenty of resources and alternatives that I feel like you could have used, right? So like what was it specifically about Wall Street Mastermind that made you say, I'm gonna go with this, as opposed to I feel like there's so many different things you can do now when it comes to like recruiting prep, right? Like so what made you want to join Wall Street Mastermind specifically?
I think there were two big things. One was seeing the interviews like this and seeing the success stories of other candidates. Um, and that sort of gave me like a positive aspect about the program as well, like seeing that other people could do, and they're coming from sort of like a similar background to me where I know I'd watched different interviews of students that are also at liberal arts schools like Colby, as well as candidates who had GPAs below a 3.5. Mine was like pretty substantially below a 3.5, and I was still able to do this. So sort of seeing people that you could relate with was one of the reasons that like I became very interested in joining the program, as well as really the teaching background as well as your background as well. I feel like a lot of these guides, like you're just trying to memorize everything versus actually being taught it, and that doesn't work for some people. Um, like you had previously mentioned, just like memorizing it could take like a really long time and just isn't effective because of how like the answer to one question, but not like the whole understanding behind like maybe what like the financial statements actually do or like what the valuation methodologies actually are.
Yeah.
So I couldn't like preface that towards like other questions that were asked to me. So I was actually being taught what the different like the different frameworks of investment banking are versus just memorizing answers. I actually wanted to learn, and I know that was the only way that
Yeah.
it was going to be effective, was like taking more of like a class style approach to it rather than just like a memorization style approach. So that's exactly the other reason why I thought Wall Street Mastermind was the way to go for myself.
Yeah, and I think like, look, everyone has like a different, to your point, everyone has like a different learning style, right? Like some people are more visual, other people are like more like auditory, whatever. And like for everyone out there, like you have to figure out kind of like what works best for you, right? Like you just think back to, all the years that you've been in school and how you've learned as a student, and like what type of format has made you like the most successful in terms of like acquiring new knowledge and also retaining that knowledge, right? And I think for most people the answer is not going to be like, if I say, hey, you have two options, right? Like you can go to the bookstore on campus and just buy a textbook and then stay home and read the textbook on your own and self-study the entire way, or alternatively you can go to class, go to lecture, talk to the professor, go to section, go to office hours, talk to your TA. You complete assignments, you get feedback on your assignments, you ask questions when you have questions. Like between those two options is like most people are probably going to learn better the second way, right? Like that's
The
why
second.
school is structured the way it's structured, right? Like, so it's like otherwise, like why are we all paying so much money to go to college? Why don't we just all go like buy some books and read it at home? It's like because that's usually not the best way to learn, right? And then unfortunately, like for people who want to get into investment banking, there's just a lot of different skills that you need, and there isn't really a class in school that teaches you all of these skills. And then so that's kind of like the gap that we're trying to fill, right? At least here at Wall Street Mastermind. And I think like um the other thing I want to touch on that's really interesting is that he talked about like, hey, seeing that other people could do it coming from a similar background as you, which I think gave you confidence, right? So like, even though you come from a non-target school, right? Even though you have like a below average GPA, especially for at least for banking recruiting, I would say it was like below average. I think like your environment matters so much because I see so many students who maybe have a similar profile as you, like if you go on Wall Street Oasis and you go on the forums and you throw your profile out there, probably you'll get a bunch of trolls telling you like, like you forget about it. You know what, you can get into banking, whatever. There's like all these like really toxic, or sometimes I don't even think people are being malicious. I think sometimes people just like it's their worldview where they don't personally know anyone like you who has gotten into banking. They're like, I don't know anyone from your school that's gotten into banking, and I don't know anyone with their GPA that's gotten into banking. All of my friends in banking go to like Ivy League schools and have 4.0 GPAs. And so if you don't have that, you can't get into banking. And it's like, that's, I'm not saying they're lying, but I'm saying like that's their version of the truth, right? Whereas like here in Wall Street Management, we regularly have students like you who don't go to a target school or who don't have like the perfect GPA, and you're still getting to banking. And then so I think that's why like the students in Wall Street Mastermind have a different belief because they're seeing the people around them literally do what they're trying to do. And it's like, there's that story about the 4 minute mile where like for the longest time, no one could run the mile in under 4 minutes. And then once the first person ran it in under 4 minutes, then all these people started breaking the 4 minute mile because as humans, like we need to see that something is possible. And then once we see that something is possible, then it gives us that belief. And then like having that belief versus not having that belief is like a lot of times that's half the battle. Like if you don't believe you can do it from the get-go, like you probably won't be able to do it, right? And then like it's also like the vice versa is also true. Like if you believe you can do it, then you probably can do it, right? And so it's like, so I think like that environment is really really important, and that's also why we try to do these interviews. Is like to inspire other people to give them the belief that they might be lacking right now, and and that can be honestly a life-changing thing, right? Um, so I'm really glad,
100%.
and thank you for sharing that. I guess so. You decided you want to join this program, and then like, did you have to like talk to your parents about it, for example? Did you have to like convince them, or did you just like invest in this program on your own, or did you get their help? Like, and if you had to talk to them, like, what was that kind of conversation like, and was that like a challenging conversation or not really?
Yeah, no. So I did. I reached out to my dad and I told him that this was something that I wanted to do. And like after having my initial interviews, that this were the costs that were involved in it. But then I also sort of had to I related with him a little bit and like I wanted him to understand where I was coming from, that like he thought that just like Colby was like obviously it's a great school and I totally understand that it's like a very prestigious school and that and such, but I had to show him that like this isn't enough to help me get into investment banking or get into what I wanted to do in the future. And once I sort of leveled with him there, um, he totally understood and he always wanted the best for me. So I had mentioned to him that like if this all works out, like there's that money back guarantee as well. So we decided to sort of go with that route just in case that this didn't work out for me, just because of how you do hear those stories where maybe like you don't come from a target score, have that GPA, it just doesn't work out for you. But so we did that as well. And obviously I told them, I was like, if this all works out, I'll be able to get you back down the line, just because I like my delivery job delivering food last summer was not was not able to cover it, especially with the school going on as well. So it was actually a really easy conversation for me with my dad, especially once he like learned like my school background, like how it wasn't like sufficient enough for me to do what I want to do in the future, and as well as how this is just like a sort of, I feel like it's just like a fraction of the cost of what's like future compensation will be for investment banking, as well as like being able to like sort of get him back in the future.
Yeah, I guess it sounds like you and your dad are both like very logical people, and then you guys basically kind of just looked at this as like a risk reward analysis where, hey, if it works, future compensation is going to be amazing. This is going to be a great ROI. If it doesn't work, there's a money back guarantee, and as long as you do the work, you just get your money back. So you can't really lose either way, basically.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation no matter what.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, and that's really is the whole point of us having the money back guarantee. So, and so that's awesome, man. And what did he say when you told him about the offers? Like, what was it? What was the reaction? Was he like relieved that, oh wow, this program actually worked? It was like, I mean, obviously, I'm sure he was like really happy for you, but like, what was that? What was that conversation?
So yeah, first off, he was just like ecstatic that my hard work sort of paid off, because I had a really busy semester with just like the recruiting program and or the recruiting time frame, and he just knew like how much was going into it, because I'd call him like weekly and just tell him like just keeping him up to date on everything and how everything was going, and like how some like the interviews like hadn't gone well because I'd gotten declined from a different bank right before I ended up getting my offer from Cascadia as well. So I was a little bit down about stuff, but he'd also seen how hard I'd been working. But no, he was ecstatic, and he was obviously he doesn't know like every detail about the program or what's going into it beyond like the baseline of what I've told him. But no, he's completely appreciative. He's always just like, make sure you reach out to your coaches no matter what questions you have or like any advice you need on anything in the future down the line. But he's just like, make sure you thank every single person that sort of helped you get to where you are today. So without a doubt, he has no regrets about it.
That's awesome, man. So I guess let's talk a little bit about because we've been talking about like okay why you decided you want to watch Mastermind, how you were able to come into the program. So after you joined the program, like for the last 2 months or so, obviously you started getting better results, right? Because it's like you ultimately got multiple interviews across different areas like asset management, sales and trading, investment banking, so on and so forth. Um, and so like what do you feel like changed for you? Like what were the things that you started doing differently, or what were like the few things that maybe had the biggest impact on just your approach and also like obviously the results that you started getting? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there were two really big things for me. I think one thing I'll start out with, one thing that I already felt comfortable with, especially Having a brother that kind of helped me out with these different sort of interview questions with the behaviorals, that was like the one thing about the sort of interview process that I was like felt comfortable with, besides like the questions related to like banking, that I had to just get like a greater knowledge on, just like what actually investment banking was, or like why I wanted to join a certain group, or etc. But there were really two main things. My first one, or three, I guess. The first was my resume. My resume, just like I feel like the aesthetic of your resume is very, very crucial to like
Mm,
how like successful you are, like going through like that first screening process of any bank. And my like initial resume was just there's just a lot of white space. It just seemed pretty blank. I didn't have like the experience that I sort of needed, especially with the GPA that I had. I only really had like an upcoming internship that wasn't the most relevant at the time, which I ended up changing what I was doing that for this upcoming summer.
mm,
So really filling up that blank space, as well as I ended up finding like a search fund for like a upcoming private equity firm that I was able to sort of pad the resume as well. So it really came down to, first off, my resume, which it needed a big touching up on, and the second was networking, which is completely crucial to the investment banking recruiting process. I remember there was one call that I like that I like I'll always remember, just because of how much it's affected my recruiting process. And it was with, he wasn't like maybe like the most friendly guy. He was a little bit standoffish, just because of like how he like didn't want to be pestered with all these networking emails. But he's like, okay, I saw you were like an athlete at Colby, and I just wanted to take this call. So he just like was very straightforward with me. Just told me, he's like, I sent him my resume. He's like, this makes you look like you're just like an athlete, and like that's not gonna like get you into a bank. So he gave me a bunch of advice on sort of what to change. And he was like, first off, like I didn't know I wanted to do this, just because I didn't think it would help. But he's like, get your GPA out of here right now. He's like, well, someone's going to see this and just cross you off right away. So that's what I did right after that. And then he had a few touch ups on like sort of formatting and like maybe different bullet points to highlight, because it was just um, too heavy on my older experiences that weren't relevant at all, versus like what I'd been doing currently, that were a little bit more relevant. We're going to help out my resume, as well as I had a name down, which he like this he thought of was a great idea to change. So I'm working at an asset management firm called Kuvare Holdings, but I'm working for their asset management team called Kuvare Insurance Services, which is like, this makes it sounds like you're like trying to work in insurance. So like just use like the parent company name, because it's still like it still technically counts. So even after making those like minute changes to my resume, everything changed from there. Like right after I had done that, or like taken some of the tips that like one of these networking calls gave me, as well as the advice from the format of the resume that Wall Street Mastermind gave as well. I was starting to get interviews like very quickly after that, which was really like uplifting to me. And then I think the final thing that I really needed help on, which was the main reason that I wanted to join the program, was the technical side of it. I just had zero knowledge whatsoever, and sort of by the time I was able to get through the program as well, I thought I had a great knowledge, and I still think I do, and have the ability to answer a lot of those questions that are typically asked in an interview.
gotcha. Okay. Couple of questions for you, which I feel like a lot of people might have based on what you just said. And so obviously, like, look, the resume is super important, like you said. Especially, I mean, if you come from a non-target school, your GPA is lower, like you need some other way to stand out, and usually that comes down to like how relevant can you make your experiences seem, and then also like obviously the aesthetics of the resume, like you said, in terms of like formatting and things like that. When you took off your GPA, it sounds like that made a big difference for you. Did you get asked about your GPA a bunch in your interviews when like you didn't have it on there, or like people just didn't really ask?
I was asked in one screening, but every other interview, no one mentioned it, which I was really surprised about. So I like sort of had like this answer ready in my head for like maybe why I didn't have it on there. But no, it never really came up. It came up once, and it wasn't even like it was like a confirm your GPA question, not like a why is your GPA this question.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, that's really interesting. Because personally, with your GPA, I always tell people, I would have told people like, I don't think it's, I didn't think it was so bad to the point where like, you know,
Yeah.
you can have it on your resume. Like, and that was just my personal opinion, right? But I'm always open to being wrong. Personally, like when I see someone's resume and they don't have a GPA on there, like I automatically assume the worst. And I'm like, oh, this guy probably has like less than a 3.0, right? And then so that's why I was like, with your GPA, I was like, no, you could just kind of discount yourself by doing that. But hey, the results are what they are. Like you took it off and you started getting better results. So like again, like I said, I'm open to being wrong. And this is the beauty of recruiting is like from working with like almost 1,000 students at this point, I feel like I'm still constantly learning new things. And that's the wild thing about it. But on the technical side, um you say like you had no technical knowledge whatsoever. I mean, obviously you had done some like reading the
Yeah.
guide and memorizing stuff, but I guess that didn't really count because you didn't really understand what you were memorizing, right? And so, can you talk a little bit about, I mean, what was so different about how you learned the technicals once you came to the program? Like, because obviously you got to the point where you knew enough to get this offer, and so, like, what do you think clicked for you, or why was it that you weren't able to understand this information before, but then now you could?
Yeah, I think it really stems down to I did not put a lot of effort in learning the technicals at first just because of how I was I was honestly really down about not getting like sending out like so many applications and just getting absolutely zero interviews and just getting rejected from everything. So I was just I really did not spend a lot of time like trying to learn the technical side of it versus just trying to get a first round interview as a whole. And that's exactly why I was like completely completely like embarrassed in my first interview when I was asked like maybe like one of the more simple questions about the financial statements and like was not even able to answer that. Um, so yeah, just going back to like the guides and different things like that, I really like just did not like stem my focus on technical questions just because I honestly never thought I was going to get an interview just at the rate I was going. I was like, wow, this is just like this is horrible. Like I'm not like it's not even worth my time to try to learn this. Like maybe I should like look into something else to do. Um, and that's exactly why I sort of came to the Wall Street Mastermind program as well, just to sort of be able to learn these concepts. And I know that being able to learn from you, especially because you have an actual experience in investment banking, you were able to make the different concepts super relatable and understandable. Like I feel like all students in college can sort of attest to this, like how well you do in a class or how much you enjoy a class. Like maybe won't stem down to like your actual interest in the subject versus like how good the teacher actually is.
Mm,
And that's exactly what I thought Wall Street Mastermind gave, and that's exactly what I thought you gave. I was able to maybe go through these videos once, and have like a 100% like a better understanding just going through it one time. Like obviously you would rerun it through again just to sort of touch up on some different things that you maybe like didn't fully understand or like grasp the first time, just because it's new material. You like are not familiar with it, you haven't come across it yet, so you're not going to know everything just like through your first go. But no, I just thought like being able to even run through it once or like have this like it was like a more conversational, like more relatable like style of teaching was super helpful and helped me really become more familiar with their material and really comfortable with the material as well.
yeah, I think you make a really good point there, which is like, I mean, we've all been there. Like we had some classes in school where the professor is amazing and like made the class really easy and really enjoyable. And then we also have some classes where like the professor is horrible. I mean, like the professor is probably really very much a subject matter expert,
Yeah.
but it's not the same thing as like being able to teach it to someone else, right? Because it's actually like a different skill set. Like being able to teach it to someone else requires you to like be able to break things down in a manner that's simple to understand and kind of like, you know, just concise, right? And actually on that note, that's actually like that is the test for whether you actually understand the technical concepts or not, right? Like even for you as a candidate and for all everyone that's kind of like listening to this or watching this, like the test for whether you actually know these technical concepts or not is like, can you teach it to other people? And so like if usually if you're just memorizing just from the guides, you're not going to be able to teach these concepts to someone else. You're not going to be able to explain these concepts to someone else. But if you try to like actually like walk your younger brother through like what is a DCF, like explain it to your younger brother who has no finance knowledge whatsoever in layman terms, and you can actually do that, then you probably actually know how a DCF works. And then like it doesn't really at that point it's not about what questions they ask you or don't ask you. Like they can ask you whatever they want about DCF, and you're going to be able to think on your feet and kind of adapt. And that's kind of the level you have to get to, right, in order to get these jobs. To be honest, at the end of the day, so I think that's a really really good point that you bring up there. So I guess okay, so the three big things that like really kind of changed the game for you. You improved your resume significantly. You got a lot better at networking. Sounds like you were actually able to have networking conversations where it wasn't just like one of these superficial conversations, but it was like you not
Yeah.
only got a call with the banker, but you got them to really want to go out of their way to help you, which then they gave you some really good advice that ended up having a big impact. So that's amazing, and that really is like that is what you hope for in all of your networking calls, right? It doesn't always happen, but that's really what you're striving for. And then the technical knowledge, like obviously, I mean, those are like probably three of the most important areas when it comes to anyone's investment banking recruiting process, right? So I think that makes a lot of sense that once you fix those things, you start seeing much better results. So I guess my last question that I have for you then is just now that you're on the other side and you have this offer, what is the best piece of advice that you want to kind of pass down to other people who maybe are currently still going through the process, or maybe people who are planning on going through the recruiting process in the future? Like, is there something like that that you feel like made a big difference for you that you want to share with other people?
Yeah. I think there are two like pieces of advice that I want to give. One is that in order to be successful sort of in this process, you're really gonna have to put your head down. You're gonna have to go to work. I know you had stressed this to me and like the different calls that we've had earlier in the process, especially like the intro call. It is a lot of work, and especially starting in that later time frame that I sort of had, you have to go through a lot in a short amount of time. So you really have to sort of break down your schedule and like maintain that you're like sort of holding yourself accountable, holding yourself um, to everything that you say you're going to do. And if you do those things, I think that anyone can really be successful in this process, no matter where you are, sort of where you stand, especially in comparison to other people. So really just being diligent. You have to be diligent. You have to work hard. Like it's obviously it's competitive for a reason because it's not something that's easy to get into. Like it's what like only 1 to 2% of people actually get into investment banking as a whole, and you're gonna have to work. Like it's not just gonna come to you if you sign up for the program. Like you're actually gonna have to sort of be able to put your head down and do that work and just want to learn and want to be able to do this as a career path if that's really what fits you. As well as I think another piece of advice that I want to give is that it really is like you said, it is never too late. I thought it was after I sent out all of those applications just because of how I just thought that was just sort of going to be the end. Like I did all I could do. I sent out my applications. I talked to some people. Like okay, that's it. Um, but like you stated, we were able to sort of get me from like program to offer within 2 months, and I think that with like having that understanding that like maybe you think you're a little bit late in the timeline, like yeah, that might be true, but it's never like the end all be all. Like there's still opportunities everywhere. So really going back to like the diligence, the hardworking side of it, as well as like the like don't put your head down, like don't become too like negative about the process. Like there's always somewhere that needs you. And yeah, I guess those are the pieces of advice I'd want to give.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. I mean, especially on that first piece in terms of like accountability and really being able to put your head down and go to work, at least for a short amount of time. Like I mean, for you it was 2 months, which you think about it like it's really not that long in the grand scheme of things, right? But like during those 2 months, I mean, like how busy were you? Like I mean, how did your calendar look? Was it just like packed every single day, pretty much like there's no
Yeah.
down anything, right? um
Yeah.
and I don't think that a lot of students actually truly understand like how much sacrifice is required to get a job like this. I think everyone just thinks like, oh yeah, like I want this job and like yeah, I'm doing the work and I'm a hard worker and then like I've always gotten like a lot of students, especially the ones going for banking, I feel like they've always, for the most part, gotten what they wanted in life relatively easily, right? Like, oh, they were a good student throughout junior high and high school, and then now they got to a good college, and then like, it's been like pretty smooth sailing the whole time. But like as you like continue, down your journey, and then like each successive thing becomes harder and more selective and more competitive, like the degree of difficulty increases pretty significantly, right? Like it's almost like it's not like linearly. I feel like it's almost like exponentially. And having worked with, almost 1,000 students at this point, I can tell you like there's a very wide variance between like the if I like kind of plotted all the students that we worked with on a spectrum in terms of like how hard they actually work on the recruiting process, like the variance is huge. Like I guarantee you, everyone thinks they're hardworking, but the variance is actually huge in terms of like the most hardworking guy to like the guy who's like a complete slacker, right? And so there's a huge correlation between like how hard someone is willing to work and like their likelihood of getting an offer. Like we just see that time and time again. And um, this is why we make all of our students go through like, what we call like the time blocking exercises, because like we want to be able to visually see what you're actually spending time on. Not just what you're spending time on, but like how are you allocating your time? Like out of 168 hours in a week, how much time are you actually dedicating to investment banking recruiting prep? Whether that's working on your resume or doing your internships or networking or interview prep, like all those things count. But like how many hours a week are you dedicating to that? And based on that, if I just look at your calendar without knowing anything about you, I can tell you with pretty high degree of confidence, kind of like what your priorities are, right? And so I think like yeah. Anyway, that's really good advice. Like we're talking about getting a job that where you're gonna make significantly more than your peers. Probably like 3 to 4 times the national average coming right out of college. And so like it's not supposed to be easy, right? And I'm also really glad you brought the point about how hey, it's not like hey, you just sign up for this program, then like the offer is going to be handed to you. Like you actually have to do the work, right? And I do think that some people get the wrong idea. They think like, oh yeah, sign up for Wall Street Mastermind. Oh yeah, there's a money back guarantee. Okay, cool. Like now I can sit back, relax, and like this job's just going to come to me. Like no, it's not. Like nothing's going to happen if you do that. You still have to do the work. Just like, I mean, you're an athlete, so like this, but for people who are not athletes, like if you're a professional athlete or even if you play at the college level, like you're still the one that has to like go to practice, put in the reps, get ready, and then go out and compete when it's game day. Like your coach is there to help you, but like your coaches can't win the game for you. Right. And like the athlete has to work extremely hard if you want to compete at the highest level. Right. And like this is no different. And so I think like anyway, those are some of my thoughts on the advice that you just shared, because I think like it's all really, really great advice, and hopefully people take it to heart. So with that said, guys, if you're still with us and a lot of what we talked about resonates with you, maybe you also go to a non-target school, maybe you feel like you're starting late, maybe you've already been trying a bunch of stuff on your own, even submitting applications and things like that, and you're not seeing the results that you want. I just want you to know, like, it's not too late, right? Like, or even if it is late, like it's better late than never, and it is still possible for you to get an offer. But time is of the essence, obviously, right? So I would encourage you to reach out to us. You can schedule a call with our team so that we can learn more about your situation and see what it is that you need help with, and what your goals are, and how we might be able to help. And then like if it's a good fit, like we'll walk you through like exactly how we will help you. We can talk about our guarantees. We can talk about whatever you want to know about our program, and then we can kind of move forward from there. All right. So if you guys want to do that, if you're interested in doing that, you can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. It's wallstmastermind.com/apply. And you'll be asked to fill out like a very, very short application just because we do require you to apply because we can't work with everyone. So but yeah, aside from that, Patrick, thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about your journey. I think this will be very, very helpful for a lot of the people that follow us. And so I want to congratulate you again on turning things around in such a short
Thank
amount of time and getting a really, really solid offer for next summer. And looking forward to seeing what you accomplish. And also, I'm glad you'll be in Seattle where I live. And so hopefully let's meet up and grab a drink or something.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we're gonna wrap it up here. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll be back with more of these for you guys in the near future. And until next time, all right.